in the process, Madam Speaker. If you look at the age of the nominees, you will see that both are senior citizens. And I say this in jest because we need to get to a point where we are having more youth participating and being able to come to the table where the decisions are being made. Madam Speaker, in the interest of time, I want to conclude, but before I conclude, I want to say that since we have seen, and I don't know whether this will be taken as a recommendation, but since we have seen that the systems of Senate, that the committees of Senate are actually very effective and efficient, Madam Speaker, perhaps this is an opportune time to have a conversation as to why the Senate is not involved in vetting cabinet secretaries or all other nominees that are sent to the National Assembly. And if it is because it is pegged on a standing order or the Constitution, Madam Speaker, that is why we are here as legislators. I believe that this House can add good input in terms of vetting. As you can see, the Finance Committee has proven again and again that we are good at this and our processes are transparent. And I believe that some of us also, Madam Speaker, would be able to pose certain questions. Madam Speaker, you know, on Sunday I was listening to the nominee, Cabinet Secretary nominee of gender, Madam Speaker, and I asked myself, maybe it was an issue of lack of preparedness, maybe it was an issue of mismatch in terms of what she was told to prepare for and what they were asking. I don't know what the issue was, but Madam Speaker, had we been sitting there as representatives of the Senate, we would be able to demystify why our cabinets engage in how maybe we can better our processes by referencing the current ongoings in the National Assembly. Madam Speaker, if I am out of order, I withdraw.
Senator Gloria, maybe what I would guide you is that since the process is ongoing and we would not want to put the cart before the horse, I believe the report is not yet done. The determination is still pending before the House, and comments on the floor of this House could as well give an impact on the mind of the interviewing panel. So the best is to leave that issue out in your debate until it's determined by National Assembly, when then it becomes open for us to also debate upon it. So please be guided accordingly, and for the time being you can withdraw it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I definitely do hope that the comments I have made will impact the committee. However, I withdraw.
We do not want those comments. Just to clarify, these comments should not be the ones that are guiding that committee. That House is independent and should objectively make its own finding and verdict. They are competent men, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members who are superintending over that matter. So they have the capacity to determine, to prepare a report, give us the report, upon which we will be able then to debate on it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand guided. I wish to conclude by saying that we need to be responsible enough to make our processes efficient, Madam Speaker. My point was that as senators who are watching the vetting, Madam Speaker, there are a lot of glaring questions in terms of the processes, and perhaps what I was trying to shed some light on is that maybe a few notes could be taken from the Finance Committee, and maybe, Madam Speaker, the conversation that I'm trying to forcefully introduce to this House is how does the Senate at one point interact with that process or is able to give input, Madam Speaker. However, having said that, I want to conclude by saying that I proudly second this motion and support this report, and I do hope that once we have the two nominees approved and they start their work, Madam Speaker, they will remember that as Senate we are there to protect the interests of the county, and Madam Speaker, that they should also remember that their nomination should guide and help protect the interests of the counties as commissioners within the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. I submit. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I propose the question that Senate adopts the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the Senate nominees on behalf of the county governments to the position of the member of Salaries and Remuneration Commission laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 23rd July 2024, and further pursuant to Article 232B 7 of the Constitution and Section 7.2 of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission Act, recommends Ms. Lynette Washiali Muganda, and Mr. Muhammad Aden Abdi to the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning for transmission to His Excellency the President for consideration for appointment to the position of Member of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Honourable Senators, the motion is open for debate, and I will ask Senator Chirarike Samson Kiprotich to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. From the onset, I want to laud the Committee of Finance and Budget. I know it's one of the busiest committees.
And before you proceed, I think it's important I guide the House that the law requires nomination of a recommendation of 2 candidates, a man and a woman, and the President will appoint one of them. Thank you. May proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for that guidance. I was to indicate, but it is important you did. Madam Speaker, I want to support and say the Finance and Budget Committee has done a tremendous job, a good job. For this, I think this report is well done, well captured, Madam Speaker. I think apart from the Senate County Public Accounts Committee, the second busiest committee is Finance and Budget, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have seen credentials and the role of SRC, Madam Speaker. Let me say the following. Of course, under Article 230, the role of SRC cannot be gainsaid. It is very critical because now the decision of review of civil servants' salaries, which we are being told today, Madam Speaker, out of the revenue we collect as a country, Madam Speaker, 1.1 trillion goes to public servants in this republic. Therefore, the role SRC plays is very critical, Madam Speaker. And I've seen SRC has not been taking lightly the comments we make about their work. I have even suggested in the past that SRC should be a part-time commission because their work is not 8 to 5, Madam Speaker. Their work is to review periodically the salaries and remuneration and personal emoluments of public servants and state officers across this country, as was envisaged in Article 230. In fact, we should be looking at possibility of reducing the number of SRC commissioners in this republic, Madam Speaker, so that we are also, because if we are spending 1.1 trillion on salaries, personal emoluments for state officers, Madam Speaker, for civil servants, it is unfair because these civil servants, majority of Kenyans are not employed by a government, Madam Speaker. And therefore, even as we approve or as we transmit this motion, Madam Speaker, for the Minister of Treasury, of course, as we wait for the report of the National Assembly on the vetting exercise, of course, the CS nominee of Treasury, John Badingongo, should, if they get opportunity, to ensure that these people we approve give value to the offices that we are talking about. And therefore, in fact, SRC, Madam Speaker, has not been helpful in advice. By the way, if the reading, Madam Speaker, and you are a very senior lawyer in this republic, Madam Speaker, and Secretary General Emeritus, who ensured that you midwife the current government, Madam Speaker, it cannot be gainsaid. The work of SRC is to advise. I don't know where they got these powers. They have arrogated themselves powers to set the salary. It's not their business, Madam Speaker. And we have sat, Madam Speaker, they have never assisted us. Look, for example, at UHC, Universal Health Coverage in Tans. We spend hours here. They told us they will work with the Council of Governors to confirm under permanent and pensionable terms of UHC in Tans, Madam Speaker. Who served this country as true heroes when we have a COVID of 2020? They didn't assist. We have had push and pull over the issue of members of County Assembly, the MCS, Madam Speaker. Their personal emoluments, their welfare, Madam Speaker, but they have done nothing to ensure, Madam Speaker. And you know, under the labor laws, the law does not allow anybody to have their salary cut. It is never practiced anywhere in the world, Madam Speaker. We have told them, Madam Speaker, can you advise the country on the issue of welfare of members of County Assembly, Madam Speaker? We have insisted, we have sat through the AMCA, Madam Speaker. SRC has been no show. We have sat with a CAF, Madam Speaker. We have even, you remember, the intern doctors that demonstrated for the longest time possible. SRC could not advise the country, Madam. It is their domain to give a practical, implementable with the current, Madam. You saw the embarrassment that they wanted to put members of, and I suspect SRC was part of the people who are inciting Gen Z in this Republic, Madam. Because when there were protests in these countries, SRC went and issued a circular of increasing salaries of members of parliament and other state officers. If we had not rejected, Madam Speaker, tungesalamiwa with these Gen Zs, they have embarrassed us. It means they are not having their work cut out. They don't follow what they should be doing as SRC, Madam Speaker. It was embarrassing. They embarrassed the presidency. They embarrassed the state officers, members of parliament. When the country is going through hard economic times, Madam Speaker, why would you want to increase the salary? And it embarrasses us, Madam. We in fact, I propose that through your office and through the head of public service, SRC must give us unreservedly apology to the country of the Kenya and state officers for putting us into embarrassment and setting us against coalition cause with the great people of Kenya, Madam Speaker. We have Kenyans who are earning less, Madam Speaker. Why don't you look at officers and county commander and county security team are sitting while young people, criminals hired by the governor, are walking around with the djembe sticks, harassing young men and women, pregnant mothers, the disabled in Kapsabet town in a clear, broad daylight, Madam Speaker. And yet we are struggling here. As we talk today, the ECD teachers of Nandi County are supposed to go on strike because they have not been paid. But when you hire hooligans, the county has money to hire, but they can't buy drugs. They can't pay ECD teachers very well, Madam Speaker. The roads are impassable in Nandi as we talk, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, has a house, and I'll be bringing a comprehensive statement to have the Inspector General of Police. We are doing what we call in quotes bad manners in this country, Madam Speaker. Because if you're allowing criminals to walk around with djembe sticks, with crude weapons, in a big town like Kapsabet, Madam Speaker, what are you selling the rest of the country, Madam Speaker? I will be challenging, Madam Speaker, and therefore, we must agree that even as we approve, we pass anything, Madam Speaker, in this house, we must ensure, Madam Speaker, we speak truth to the power. And governors should understand that they don't exist, they don't have powers that they can overrun the police, Madam Speaker, that they can overrun the security apparatus. Unless you are telling the country you no longer trust, Madam Speaker, under Article 37, the right to picket and demonstrate. You saw there were national protests. I didn't hear the president directing or taking people to street to counter demonstrate. In fact, the president said, let people demonstrate and be given security as per Article 37 and 38. Unless Kapsabet town, Madam Speaker, is in another country. But if it is in the country that is Kenya, just like Kilifi, just like Mombasa, just like our neighbors in Kakamega, just like in Homa Bay, just like in Tana River, Madam Speaker, then there is a big problem, Madam Speaker. We should be called out, and I want to challenge the Inspector General of Police acting, even as he comes for vetting. We must see action as at now to ensure that we protect the right of Kenyans. Why would you somebody have a problem? The other day, Madam Speaker, we normally have demonstrators here at the gate. You as the Speaker has never ordered anybody to be clobbered or being harassed for coming to Parliament to present their petition, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the SRC under Article 230, even in vetting. Madam Speaker, I was surprised because I saw members of National Assembly and it is unanswered. If somebody challenged me, I can produce. When the message was read of vetting of Inspector General of Police, I was embarrassed that some members of National Assembly, and it is in the interest of a minority leader, Madam Speaker, Senator Retired Justice Madzai, that some members of National Assembly said Senate does not have a role in vetting of Inspector General of Police. Which constitution are they reading? Which law? Security is a shared function, Madam Speaker. The security is a shared function, just like a disaster preparedness emergency. I was wondering, Madam Speaker, and I always get shocked. Which country are we in when members of National Assembly contest the vetting? Madam Speaker, if members of National Assembly embarrass themselves with what they did, they should not use that Senate to redeem themselves. They should redeem themselves. Why were they bash and attack Senate? They attacked us on conflict of interest bill. It is unanswered. They didn't want Senate to be part of the Inspector General of Police vetting. It is the Constitution. The law is very clear under Article 93. Parliament is the Senate and the National Assembly. Security is a shared function. You cannot say, and that is why we fought in this Parliament. And I know people who have stayed longer, like Senator Mansai and Senator Kalwale, will tell you, we wanted even governors to sit in County Security Committee. Because if a problem occurs today, you will need that governor to be part of security restoration within that county or within that constituency, madam. We fought for long. So it was embarrassing. Even senior house leaders, like my majority whip, Silvana Sosoro, I thought they should not bear, Madam Speaker, and the answer can bear me witness. And that is why, Madam Speaker, in conclusion, when I saw even vetting of CSS, I know the report is being written, Madam Speaker, but we can make general observations because it was an open process, Madam Speaker. You find the process of vetting of cabinet nominees, Madam Speaker. Even the chair was talking more than the nominees and making just comments, Madam Speaker, and making funny comments. How do you tell a nominee, don't bring your bedroom matters before this committee? Is that even a valid question to ask? Instead of asking how many taxes you are paid for this country, what is your ability, what is your competence? Madam Speaker, I'm impressed by a number of nominees. One person who impressed me is former Governor of Mombasa, Ali Hassan Joe. Despite getting a D-, he is having 2 masters and is going for PhD. Which inspiration would you want? That inspiration is the best. It means in life you must work hard. So from that vetting, at least the young people who do not perform well, people who went to Kumbaru, Madam Speaker. I know Senator Kalwala has not been having kind words towards me, but the inspiration of Governor Ali Hassan Joho, the nominee of mining and blue economy, Madam Speaker, even shocked the country with the grasp of Queen's language, with that clear thought process, Madam Speaker. I think that was the observation, Madam Speaker. Another nominee that impressed me was the former MP of Garissa Town, Aden Duale, Madam Speaker. I was happy with his honesty. He said he doesn't receive phone calls because members of parliament are corrupt. Anyway, the chair did not decide to correct, so it is unanswered. The Minister Duale was an honest man. He said he does not receive our phone calls as members of parliament because we are corrupt, Madam Speaker. But no one corrected. It is unanswered. We can print it and bring it here, Madam Speaker. So we need honest. Even Madam Speaker, Eric Muredi, that was having is what 32 million. I want to agree and challenge the GNC that Eric Muredi, Madam Speaker, if approved, will be is only 32 million worth. He doesn't have a car. He's a young man with a vision. That should encourage, Madam Speaker, how we perform as a country. We should believe in the people that we have, Madam Speaker. So even as we did vetting, and I'm proposing this, Madam Speaker, going into the future, can you direct when our committees does vetting, like finance and budget? I have noticed in our committee rooms, Madam Speaker, there is no video recording. It is only answered. I wish and I request, and I wish the commissioners or the commissioner is here, at least every committee room should have a video recording so that we have the answer and video recording, so that some of us, Madam Speaker, some of these videos that are being vetted, Madam Speaker, can have opportunity to be able to go through, Madam Speaker. So the exercise that has been carried, we hope when the report will be tabled, I think, Madam Speaker, going into the future, let us ensure the track record, the capacity and ability, Madam Speaker, goes into the future, Madam Speaker. So we believe the vetting that was being done, and I want to request, Madam Speaker, I don't know how your office will look. I want to request the way we saw vetting in National Assembly with cabinet nominees. I don't know, we should have structured questions to be used in vetting, like the way the Finance and Budget Committees and Senator Kalwale is here, should tell us what would happen, Madam Speaker. Because the questions that were being asked, Madam Speaker, some are embarrassing, some were supposed to juxtapose, Madam Speaker, let us ensure, even as we wait for the report, and I hope we'll get the report from the National Assembly when they table it on Wednesday or Thursday, Madam Speaker, that report we should get it and ensure that it comes to place. Of course, Madam Speaker, I would have comments on nominee of sports because that is transferring incompetence from roads to sports, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, going into the future, we must agree under Article 230 on SRC that let us approve.
Senator Cherargei, I had given a direction regarding commenting on a process which has not been completed by the other house. I gave that direction to Senator Gloria, and it should have clearly informed your debate. It seems not to have been informed by that, and I now guide you not to touch that process until Speaker, it's determined and a report done by the other house. Because the integrity of that house is equally protected as the integrity. The process they are doing is equally protected, just like the process is being done by this house. So please withdraw that.
Madam Speaker, there is what we call fair comment in a fair administration process, and I'm just making a general comment. I have not mentioned anybody's name, unless you know that person. Have I? I have not.
The nominee is clearly known, Senator Cherargei.
Madam Speaker, I think the standing orders...
Every member would take judicial notice of who the nominee in respect of the Ministry of Sport is. So it is safest to do what Senator Gloria did, leave that process until it begs full respond to it. And since they are not, and the report is not yet out, if the report was out and a verdict has already been rendered by the panel on the other house, then it will be easy to debate and it will be easy to accept as a public record once the report is out. So I still guide that since they cannot defend themselves, we allow the National Assembly to complete the process while we await the report. We will still have a chance to debate that report. I believe that. Thank you. You can finish, Senator Cherargei.
Madam Speaker, I want to wish well the two candidates. I know the law says President will appoint one. And the committee, of course, we hope to see those SRC members before this committee, Madam Speaker, but to support and ask the House to support and ask the SRC, if one of them, because there are two, if either of them succeed, Madam Speaker, they should assist the country in advising on the issue of ballooning, Madam Speaker, not only national wage, but also county wage. The only county that is below, Madam Speaker, because I have advantages that is below 35% is Turkana County. The rest are beyond 35 as per the regulations on wage bill. We need also to work with County Public Service Board to bring that to an end. With those many remarks, Madam Speaker, and in suggesting remarks, I therefore support the report, Madam Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kajwang Moses Otieno.
Madam Speaker, I rise to contribute to this motion. Whenever we give a task to committees of the House, it is our belief that they prosecute and execute in the best interest of the House, in the best interest of the nation, and in accordance with the Constitution of Kenya. Madam Speaker, I have requested for disclosure on the CVs of the applicants that the committee considered, because in the report, the committee has mentioned that there were very many applicants. There were 48 applicants. And then there was a short list of about 10, and then about 15, and then 2 persons were picked from that list. And Madam Speaker, I take note that when I look at the short list, we have 2 ladies who topped the list. And that's quite impressive to find that 2 female applicants were considered to be the best. Now, the law requires that the House nominates a man and a woman. And as a result, Madam Speaker, I can see from this report that there is a female applicant who came from Mombasa County, who was number 2, and that is Mohammed Nahida Athman, who got 71.29% score, higher than Mohammed Aden Abdi, the male whom the lot has fallen on, who got 70.29. Mr. Speaker, when you're debating this kind of motion, it's important that the clerks give us the full information, the full picture, because I would be very, very interested in seeing the CV of Lynette Washiali Muganda from Kakamega, the CV of Mohammed Nahida Athman, and the CV of Mohammed Aden Abdi. Madam Speaker, the Senate has got a role in constitutional commissions. Now, this is part of it, and this is a very, very important role that we play. How I wish that our colleagues knew how important this role is and how hard we have fought for the Senate to be involved in appointments and financing of independent commissions. The approval of the Inspector General of Police is another solemn duty that this House must undertake, because the Constitution requires Parliament collectively to make that decision. The Commission on Revenue Allocation is another constitutional commission where our input is required. The Parliamentary Service Commission is another constitutional commission where the Senate is involved. Madam Speaker, our role is not only limited to vetting and making proposals. Our role, as per the Constitution, extends to funding. And when it comes to funding, Article 249(3) of the Constitution says, and Madam Speaker, I like reading this out because sometimes people wonder why the Senate wants to be involved in the affairs or in the financial matters of independent commissions. Article 249(3) says,
What is your point of order, Senator Gloria?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to bring to your attention under the Standing Order 246, under the Standing Order on broadcasting as well, Madam Speaker, there has been a recurring incident every time I speak in this. Not every time, but at least 3 times when I've been speaking, Madam Speaker. It is an intentional sabotage that when I'm at the floor, somehow, for a very peculiar reason, the online...
Back to this, because this is an extremely important undertaking that this Senate is called upon to do on behalf of county governments and on behalf of the nation. Madam Speaker, when you bring this motion for delegations and for senators to approve or reject, you must provide the full information and full disclosure. As I had said earlier, that there were 48 applicants who were narrowed down to 15. And the committee has given us the names of 2 applicants for consideration and for approval. Madam Speaker, I cannot make a decision in the absence of the details of the qualifications of those other applicants who have been shortlisted. In this list, Madam Speaker, I see Mr. Silas Otieno Owiti from Homa Bay, who scored 59.71%. At least give me a glimpse onto his CV. At least give me a glimpse, give me the notes so that I can see from the minutes how the performance was. And Madam Speaker, when it came to the appointment of Dr. Amoth, which is a motion before the House, I am seeing annexures and minutes and all the details of considerations of the committee. But when it comes to the discussion of these 2 nominees to the SRC, I have even requested in the official WhatsApp group for the annexure that carries the CVs, the annexure that carries the conversations that led to this decision. Madam Speaker, we must be careful because I've been through this exercise. I do recall about 6 years ago when this House was called upon to make a similar decision. There were even accusations of favor. There were even accusations of tribalism. There were even accusations that the committees were operating with an end in mind. And Madam Speaker, at that time, some of the applicants were former senators. They were former colleagues. It was very sad when some of them, a former senator who has been in this House for 5 years, was being disqualified for lack of experience. If you have been a senator for 5 years, or a member of National Assembly for 5 years, what other experience do you need to get a job in this country? What other experience do you need to undertake a role in a constitutional commission? And Madam Speaker, I want to be convinced that such considerations were not made in this case. And it will be important that before we take the vote, that we get the full disclosure of the minutes and the conversations and the resolutions and any dissenting opinion, if there was a dissenting opinion of members of that committee, Madam Speaker, because as I look at the adoption schedule, it has been approved by 5 out of 9. I would like to hear what the other 4 had to say with respect to the final decision that has been brought to this House. Madam Speaker, I am not imputing any improper motive. I am just asking for full information so that I can make a decision on the motion that is before us.
What is the point of order? Your point of information.
Sorry.
Would you like to be informed by Senator Boni Halwale?
Madam Speaker, out of respect, I would wish to listen to Senator Boni Halwale.
Senator Halwale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the concerns by the Senator of Homa Bay are right and justified. It is true that what you are looking for is both on the Hansard recording of the proceedings of the committee, but it's also true that it is part of the report which has not been brought here. What you have here is the executive summary of the report. We could not have done all that we did for all the candidates. Number 2, Madam Speaker, the issue he has raised about the fear that there could have been tribalism and stuff like that, it will help. We had a marking scheme. The nearest way the committee approached the issue of how to handle the great tribes of Kenya was the constitutional requirement of regional balancing as to how much one was getting for academic endowment. If you had a bachelor's degree, you scored less than master's degree, and so on up to PhD. I beg to inform.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank Senator Halwale. Indeed, as a member of this committee, if there is important information that has not been brought before this House, then this motion should be stood down. I am looking at a similar report of a nomination for Dr. Amoth, Madam Speaker. And I'm looking at the iPad here. There is an annexure that is 244 pages. 244 pages. It has minutes. It has details. Why is this different? And it is a similar process where we are being called upon to exercise our constitutional and statutory duty to make approvals or appointments to constitutional commissions. This committee then, this motion should be deferred, and this conversation should stop at this moment until the committee brings us a full report, Madam Speaker. The report we have is 28 pages. 28 pages. How do we know that justice was served? If it was not the respect that I had for Senator Halwale, how would this House have been informed of that criteria? Madam Speaker, as I've said, I've gone through this process. And this particular process, we came to some conclusions. It was established that a committee had dismissed a former senator on the basis of lack of experience. And I've kept asking that once you have been elected as a senator or nominated as a senator, you have sat in this House approving budgets, approving appointments, writing laws, you have sponsored laws. How can a committee then come and tell you that you do not have requisite experience to become a member of a commission? And that's why we're insisting we need to see those annexures to see whether those kind of arguments found their way in the decision of this committee. Madam Speaker, I will leave it to the leadership of the House and to your wisdom to decide whether we are proceeding with adequate information and whether you're doing the right things. But let me make certain broad comments, Madam Speaker, as that point is still under consideration. That our role does not end with appointment. Our role extends to funding for constitutional commissions. And Madam Speaker, we have been weak and we have allowed that function or that role to go to the National Assembly when Parliament or when the Constitution clearly states that that is the role of Parliament. I want to read Article 249(3), which says that Parliament and not National Assembly and not Senate, that Parliament shall allocate adequate funds to enable each commission and independent office to perform its functions, and the budget of each commission and independent office shall be a separate vote. End of quote. Madam Speaker, the word there is Parliament, and it is not National Assembly. We have a responsibility, we have a duty to be engaged in the budgeting and resource allocation. When the committee makes reference to Standing Order 76 and 77, this interview should have been done in line with the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, the same instrument that the National Assembly has been using to vet the cabinet secretaries. And Madam Speaker, the reason why I say so is that the Public Appointments and Parliamentary Approval Act provides great detail on how this exercise should be conducted. Madam Speaker, that act says that Parliament shall focus on academic credentials, professional training, experience, personal integrity, and background of those who have been proposed to take up constitutional and statutory appointments. Being a member of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission is a constitutional appointment. And so, Madam Speaker, how I wish the committee would have made reference to the Act of Parliament that is currently in existence rather than to Standing Order 76 and 77. That Act, if it would be properly implemented, and not with the kind of mischief that we have seen in past vetting for cabinet secretaries. Madam Speaker, there's a question that has always come up, the question of net worth. And I can tell you that many a times when you are vetting nominees to the cabinet, Kenyans do not remember what they said they're going to do. Because there is one thing for them to aspire to do something, but there's also the established government policies. I have seen some cabinet secretaries say how they are going to be publicly spirited and how they are going to do things differently. But let's remember that there are already budgets that have been established. There's already a president who is in office. And so if you come with views that are at variance with those of government, the existing budgets, existing plans, and the personal views of the president, then you are just going to get frustrated. But the question of net worth is one that has animated the nation. I saw a computation of the net worth of the nominees that are currently before the House, without getting to the substance of the matter, to be 10 billion. And Kenyans are offended. Kenyans are offended. What is this magic that politicians play that makes them wealth that serious corporate organizations cannot make? Madam Speaker, before I got into politics, I was in the financial services sector. You will find an insurance company collects revenue of 4 billion Kenya shillings. And at the end of the day, it makes a profit of 50 million. A technical profit. That is once the premiums have been collected and the claims have been paid. And that is an institution that perhaps has employed 200 people, that has got branches throughout the country, that is integrated, that is creating a lot of opportunities and contributions to the GDP of this country, that is paying taxes. At the end of the day, they'll probably make 50 million as an underwriting profit. What is this thing that members of parliament do that generates them the kind of profits that even insurance companies cannot generate? And it is becoming an insult to the people of this country. The majority who cannot afford, the majority hustlers, we are building for them 2 million houses, 3 million houses, and then we are proclaiming that we are billionaires. How will a billionaire understand the needs and aspirations of that person whose biggest wealth is a 2 million house? Madam Speaker, if we were faithful to this process, even these applicants who are here, we should see an annexure showing how much they are paid in taxes. If I'm worth 300 million Kenya shillings, Madam Speaker, the taxes I pay must be different from the taxes paid by somebody else who's worth 31 million Kenya shillings. By someone else who just relies on a salary and has got nothing of value because their liabilities exceed their assets. Madam Speaker, another question that must be asked is a question of conflict of interest. In the substantive act that I've referred to, there is a question on conflict of interest. If my family is doing business, perhaps in the ICT sector, and then I get into government as a minister for ICT, I must disclose and I must lay out before Parliament how I'm going to prevent potential conflict of interest. In fact, in serious jurisdictions, once you get into certain constitutional and statutory positions, you put your assets or your wealth in a trust so that you are no longer directly involved And so you are not compromised when it comes to procurement and provision of opportunities. We never ask those questions. Another question that we are required to ask under the Public Appointments Act is, have you ever been charged in a court of law? Madam Speaker, you don't hear those questions being asked. Another question we are supposed to be asked is, have you ever been advancedly mentioned in any report before Parliament? And Madam Speaker, all the 47 county governors have been adversely mentioned in reports before this House. And if we are taking seriously the reports of Parliament, which we must take seriously because we are Parliament, we must ask ourselves, during your tenure as Governor for Tana River, did the Auditor General ever raise queries? And did the Public Accounts Committee bring a report to the House? And did the House adopt a report that recommended your investigation and prosecution? You find a lot of people in public offices. There are reports we have adopted here, but when we are vetting them, we never ask those questions. And that is why, Madam Speaker, I must insist that this process should not be done in accordance with Standing Order 76 and 77. This process should be done in accordance with the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act. Let me finalize by saying that if we are going to see the annexures and satisfy ourselves that Madam Lynette Washiali Muganda and Mr. Mohamed Aden Abdi indeed were the best of the best, I will have no problem supporting this motion. But I will still need to be convinced to see the annexures, the CVs, the resumes, the minutes, and the proceedings of those meetings. Madam Speaker, the nominees, once they get to office, let them remember that they are there to represent the interests of county governments. They are not there to represent the interests of the executive. And that is why it is the Senate that has been called upon to nominate them. There are two nominees. There is one from the Parliamentary Service Commission, which is part of Parliament, but there's a specific nominee of the Senate to represent county governments. Let them remember they're representing county governments and not their stomachs and not the national executive. Let them focus on how they can help county governments to reduce their wage bill to go below 35%, because right now the general rate is 40% plus. Let them focus on building synergies with the county public service boards, county assembly service board, public service commission, so that we can have a better way of managing human resources in counties. Madam Speaker, the national government has given out a system called IPPD. IPPD, Integrated Personnel Payroll Management System. It only deals with the payroll aspect. Payroll is not HR management. Issues of recruitment, issues of appraisal, issues of promotion, issues of leave management, all those are not being managed in any system. And so we encourage these nominees to build those kind of synergies.
You have 1 minute to finish that sentence.
To build those synergies and to involve the Institute of Human Resource Management. The greatest resource that we have in county governments is a human resource. Let these two nominees go there knowing that they are going to look at the interests of county governments and not the interests of the presidency or of a broad-based government. Madam Speaker, my decision on support will be dependent upon the annexures.
Honorable Senators, we have that report which Senator Kajwang has indicated he does not have sufficient information, and thankfully Senator Halwale has offered some of the information, but ideally there is a formal way of bringing that information to the floor of the House so that all senators have an opportunity. But I want to hear a few senators what their take is on the status of that report so that we make I make a verdict or give a direction on how we proceed with the report being used as a basis for debate. So I'll ask a comment from Senator Danson Mungatana, who was next, followed by Senator Mwinyi Haji Mohamed Faki. So they are commenting on whether the sufficiency of the report so that I give a direction.
I'm guided, Madam Speaker, and I assume that my time will still be there for debate.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am of a different view, Madam Speaker, and maybe this is not a popular view, But, Madam Speaker, if you are at the very beginning of this afternoon session, the Honorable Senator Boni Khalwale, I'm personally persuaded that the leadership which is there and the information they have given us, I have no reason to impugn unless there is other information that I don't have. But from where I stand, Madam Speaker, my humble opinion is that we proceed with this debate and conclude. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Mwenye Haji Mohamed Faki.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm a member of this Committee of Finance and Budget of the Senate, and I did participate in the whole process that resulted in this report. Madam Chair, first of all, Senator Shakila and I dissented on this report and recommendations. And even this morning I did ask in the committee, I did make a comment that we had a dissenting opinion. Why is that dissenting opinion not captured in the report? Understanding order number 2 to 3, I think 5, says that a dissenting report, a dissenting opinion has to be captured in the report. A report having been appointed by a majority of senators, a minority or dissenting report may be appended to the report by any member or members of the committee. Madam Speaker, this has not been complied with. And as Senator Kajwanga said, the report is sketchy and doesn't show the true import of what transpired during the interviews. Chair, Mr. Speaker, now, it will not be prudent for us to continue the debate if those issues have not been considered. Thank you.
Senator Thangwa, it can't really be a point of order. There is no one on the floor unless it's a comment. All right, then you may comment on it.
Mr. Speaker, what you are witnessing now on the floor of this House today is one of the reasons why people are in the streets in this Republic of Kenya, because information is scanty, Mr. Speaker. We are not able to have information when vetting is going on. If you ask this country, you will only be told the vetting that was going on within this period was that of the CSs. The people probably did not have information. There was a vetting of these commissioners to represent the county government at SRC. But, Mr. Speaker, it is very sad for a member of this House to request for a postponement of a report that has been tabled. Yet these vetting were open to the public, were open to the members of this House, and anybody who wanted to find out the nitty-gritties could have attended these sittings, Mr. Speaker. Because I am commenting on this, it is not a point of order. Just the way you have commented, I'm commenting on it. We are commenting so that we assist the Speaker to make a decision. And I would request, Mr. Speaker, to be heard in silence. We listen to the two gentlemen in silence, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my issue is that once a report has been tabled in office, on the table of the Senate, every member should be given an opportunity to discuss. If you reject, you reject it. If you support it, you support it. But the issue of stepping down a report that has been put on the floor of the House, Mr. Speaker, it will go against our standing orders, Mr. Speaker. If you did not have the report, you had enough time to request for that report. And they're there. The public documents, Mr. Speaker. But it is my prayer, Mr. Speaker, that this report we continue debating, because we have so many people who will be having an opportunity to debate it, And I trust the committee, Mr. Speaker, that was mandated to do this kind of vetting. It is one of the committees that has been praised in this House, that has been doing their work diligently, Mr. Speaker. So I would go against those who are saying that we should start down the report, but I would urge you, Mr. Speaker, to rule that we continue the debate so that these people who have been nominated can have a chance to serve the people of this country.
Resume your seat, Senator Thangwa. You've been heard. Members, remember when Senator Thangwa indicated that he was rising on a point of order, I told him it was not. And unfortunately, Senator Mungatana had been asked to step down for an intervention that had come in. If that is exactly what had transpired prior to this intervention by Senator Thangwa. And so, honorable members, I am directing that even as we raise concerns about the content of this report and as to whether or not we will stand it down or we will defy it tomorrow, I will allow 2 more members to comment on it so that the chair issues a ruling as to the concerns that had been raised. I will give you members time to comment, but I need to just give directions that if we will ultimately have to make a decision as to how to treat this report, there isn't need for us to spend the entire of the afternoon when we saying the report is scanty and we need additional documents on the basis of the objections that Senator Kajwang had raised. And so what I'll do, honorable members, as I said, I'll give direction so that we are able to proceed in an orderly manner and deal with the report appropriately. So I will, I'm giving directions, and I want to give an opportunity to unlock this stalemate, particularly on the issue that had been raised to Senator Dr. Boni Halwale, so that out of it, he is the mover of that particular motion. Honorable members, Senator Olekina, Boni Halwale is not contributing. He has already spoken to the motion. I wanted us to unlock the stalemate so that we take directions appropriately. Allow Senator Boni so that we progress in a civilized manner, honorable members.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to associate myself with the sentiments and concerns by colleagues senators that they want the full report. There's no way you can debate a decision of a committee of parliament without proper information being availed to you as a senator or a member of parliament. So Senator Kajwang is right. Mr. Speaker, I also want to associate myself with the remarks by the Senator of Mombasa, Senator Faki. He's a member of this committee just like myself. He's right when he tells the House that there were 2 members who dissented, Senator Faki and Senator Sakila. It's a fact. The other 2 members, Mr. Speaker, whose vote is not recorded, did not attend the process at all. So the people who signed adopted the report, and the 2 who dissented were only 2. And when the matter was raised before the committee, Mr. Speaker, the member was reminded that they failed upon dissenting to request for the dissenting view to be part of the record. And usually, as you know, according to procedure, Senator Kajwang, Senator Olentema, Senator Wambua, dissent is normally signed. So let it rest there. And now let me come to the substantive issue by Kajwang which concerns me.
Senator Boni.
Mr. Speaker,
Senator Boni.
The report which I have.
Senator Boni.
Yes.
Just listen to the chair. Do you confirm that the report that your committee tabled and the one you tabled before the House is a complete report?
I want
just that question. Answer me.
I want
yes
to confirm. I want to confirm, Mr.
Proceed.
Speaker,
Just
kindly.
directly do that confirmation.
Which is what I wanted to say substantively. The report of the committee is here. It is complete. It has got the documents of the candidates. It has got annexures of
Directorate of Criminal Investigations, Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, and the Credit Reference Bureau. Further, the clerks of the Houses of Parliament wrote to the ODPP by the provisions of the Constitution, the Public Appointment Act Cap 7F, the Leadership and Integrity Act, that's Cap 185C, the Public Officer Ethics Act Cap 185B, the Public Service Commission Act Cap 185, the Health Act Cap 241, and the National Assembly Standing Orders and the Senate Standing Orders. Mr. Speaker, sir, following the committee's analysis of the submissions and representations received on the suitability of the candidate for appointment to the position of Director General for Health, the committees observed that Dr. Patrick Omwanda Amoth, EBS, demonstrated the requisite knowledge and experience to perform the functions of the Director General for Health. He further met all statutory and constitutional requirements for appointment to the office of the Director General for Health. And the committees further observed that the issues raised in the three memoranda were sufficiently addressed by the candidates during the approval hearing. However, informed by the concerns raised in the submissions received, the Ministry of Health ought to undertake adequate, purposive and meaningful public participation and stakeholder engagement as provided for in Article 10 and 232 of the Constitution to ensure that there is balanced and adequate representation and input of the divergent views of all stakeholders in the health sector in the development of policies and guidelines. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committees, having considered the suitability, competence, experience and integrity of Dr. Patrick Omwanda Amoth, EBS, following the approval process and taking into account its observations and findings, and pursuant to the provisions of the Constitution, the Public Appointments Act, the Health Act, the National Assembly Standing Orders and the Senate Standing Orders, recommend that Parliament approves the nomination of Dr. Patrick Omwanda Amoth, EBS, for appointment as the Director General for Health under Section 16 of the Health Act, that's Cap 241. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committees also wish to thank the Office of the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Office of the Speaker of the Senate, and the clerks of both houses and their staff for their logistical support accorded to them during the approval hearing. In addition, the committees thank the candidate for his cooperation during the approval hearing. The committees also are grateful to the members of the public who submitted their memoranda and the media for their live coverage of the proceedings, thus enhancing accountability and transparency of the approval process. Further, the committees appreciate the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority, the Chief Executive Officer, the Higher Education Loans Board, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, and the Registrar of Political Parties for providing references and background checks relating to the suitability of the candidate. Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you and wish to request the Nyamira Senator and Commissioner, Senator Okongo Mogeni, to second.
Senator Okongo Mogeni, Senior Counsel.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to second the nomination of Dr. Patrick Omwanda Amoth to be appointed Director General for Health. Mr. Speaker, I'm a member of the Committee of Health of the Senate, I was privileged, Mr. Speaker, to sit in a joint sitting with members of National Assembly that undertook this very, very important process. And Mr. Speaker, we must applaud the 2010 Constitution that has made the accountability card for those who want to serve in the public to be very high. Mr. Speaker, we must thank those who sent memoranda to the committee. I specifically want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Wahome, Mr. Speaker, who brought more than, I believe, 500-page memorandum raising an objection on the suitability of Dr. Patrick Amoth. Mr. Speaker, even though the committee did not agree with the issues that were raised by Dr. Wahome, it demonstrated to the public that Parliament undertakes a process that is fair, a process that is open to the public, a process that affords Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, an opportunity to raise any objection they have on the suitability of a candidate, provided, Mr. Speaker, the memorandum and the reasons raised, Mr. Speaker, can demonstrate that such a candidate is not suitable. On this particular instance, Mr. Speaker, though Dr. Wahome's objection did not carry the day, Mr. Speaker, he got a hearing. I remember us hearing him for more than 1.5 hours, Mr. Speaker, as he took us through what he thought was some omissions by Dr. Amoth when he served in this position in an acting capacity during the time when this country was going through COVID. So I want to encourage the likes of Dr. Wahome that even though, Mr. Speaker, his reservations do not carry the day, Mr. Speaker, that should not discourage any Kenyan, Mr. Speaker. We receive the memorandum, we wait. If we are convinced that the nominee is not suitable, that will carry the day. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I want to also make a comment that we need to relook at the provisions of the Public Appointment Parliamentary Approval Act, a law that was introduced before this House by my good friend Senator Mungatana, I believe in 2011, soon after the passage of the 2010 Constitution. It has served us well, especially where, Mr. Speaker, this House may unnecessarily delay the approval of a nominee. But on the other hand, also, Mr. Speaker, it puts a lot of pressure on Parliament, Mr. Speaker, to rush the vetting or confirmation process of nominees. I sympathize with our colleagues in the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, who have been faced with a task of undertaking a confirmation of 22 cabinet secretaries together with an Attorney General in a record period of 14 days. Mr. Speaker, that period, I think, needed to be reviewed, Mr. Speaker. Even recruitment of IEBC commissioners, Mr. Speaker, the recruitment panel is given 90 days, Mr. Speaker, because you need to get information from some of Chapter 6 commissions like EACC. You need to get information from the DPP, from the DCI, Mr. Speaker. I think we need to amend this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, and give Parliament at least a period of 90 days, Mr. Speaker. If we retain 14 days, it will be reduced to a matter of National Assembly or the Senate just ticking boxes. And, Mr. Speaker, we know how houses, houses that do confirmations, how detailed they are. If you go to the US, Mr. Speaker, out of about 118 nominees to the Supreme Court, the Senate of United States of America, Mr. Speaker, has rejected 37 nominees because they are so detailed, Mr. Speaker. They look at not just the integrity of the candidate, but even your conduct. You remember there is a judge who was rejected on account of an article he wrote in 1964 opposing the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that was extending liberties to black Americans. And because of that article, Mr. Speaker, he was rejected. I know for a fact that those who have been nominated to serve as cabinet secretaries in the US, about 8 have faced rejection, Mr. Speaker. And 9, the various presidents have been forced to withdraw the nomination. I remember the case of Senator John Tower of Texas, Mr. Speaker, who had been nominated by President Bush. But when it came to the public that he was a heavy drunkard, Mr. Speaker, the president was forced to withdraw the nomination, Mr. Speaker. I remember the case of Zubayd, nominated by Bill Clinton in 1993, Mr. Speaker. And when information came to the floor of the Senate House that she had employed an illegal immigrant who had no papers and that she had evaded paying statutory deductions to the government because she didn't want that information to go to the public, her nomination was rejected, Mr. Speaker, by the Senate. So that is how high the houses that do confirmations have put the bar, Mr. Speaker. I remember that Andrew Johnson, who was president in 1800, Mr. Speaker, he faced an impeachment before the Senate, and he asked his Attorney General, Mr. Speaker, to resign and defend him during the impeachment. The Attorney General then, Andrew Stanbury, Mr. Speaker, he resigned. He defended President Johnson ably. Once Johnson went through the impeachment process in the Senate, he reappointed Henry to take his position back as Attorney General. But the Senate said, we can't play ping-pong games. If you want to resign and go to private practice, resign, go and do private practice. And his nomination was rejected on the basis that he did not show commitment to serving in that office. So this process, Mr. Speaker, is so critical, and it is important that we as a House raise the bar. Because, Mr. Speaker, if we abuse this power of vetting and confirming nominees, next time you hear there is a constitutional review process, the way I had a proposal that Kenya should have a convention to look at the 2010 Constitution, this power, Mr. Speaker, can easily be taken away from us. So we need to do the right thing, make sure that we build public confidence on the process, make sure that the process is meaningful, Mr. Speaker, so that we retain this power as a House, because it's very, very important, Mr. Speaker. It is one of the best concepts of a country that has adopted a limited government, Mr. Speaker, because it means the executive can propose a nominee, but if that nominee does not meet the bill, it will be, that nominee can be rejected, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I don't think it serves this House and the country well for us to continue doing joint vetting by members of National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, health is a devolved function, Mr. Speaker. We should look at the process of vetting, Mr. Speaker, so that on positions like this one of the Director General for Health, Mr. Speaker, the vetting should be undertaken by the Senate. There are so many offices, Mr. Speaker, including the office of Cabinet Secretary, where the vetting is undertaken by the National Assembly without any reference to this House, Mr. Speaker. So we need to, as a House, revisit this process, Mr. Speaker, so that we demarcate roles for the two houses. Mr. Speaker, I was very impressed when I listened to this nominee. He's a person who has vast experience on health matters. He's a trained medic. Mr. Speaker, graduated from University of Nairobi. It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that we have subjected this Kenyan to be in an acting position for 5 years, Mr. Speaker. I want to ask the executive, Mr. Speaker, not to subject professionals to the anxiety of being in an acting position, Mr. Speaker, for more than 5 years. In fact, it is bad practice, human resource. It's a bad human resource practice, Mr. Speaker, to keep somebody in an acting capacity for 5 years. I hope this is the last we are seeing of a case like this, Mr. Speaker, where we deny very qualified Kenyans a chance of serving in full capacity in a position where he is well qualified. So as he takes over, Mr. Speaker, we hope that he is going to ensure that Kenyans get access to very quality healthcare services, Mr. Speaker, from our hospitals, Mr. Speaker. We have, though this is not directly under his docket, but he should be able to liaise with the NHIF, Mr. Speaker, so that the implementation of SHIF that is meant to benefit our people at the counties can be realized, Mr. Speaker. We went through the documentations, and I don't want to belabor this point, Mr. Speaker. I want to assure the country that this is a man of integrity, Mr. Speaker. The Office of Director of Public Prosecution confirmed to the committee, Mr. Speaker, that there are no pending prosecutions against this Kenyan. Ethics and Corruption Commission, Mr. Speaker, confirmed that they have no investigations that are ongoing against this particular nominee. Mr. Speaker, it's important for all Kenyans to pay their taxes, Mr. Speaker. The Constitution is very clear, Mr. Speaker, that if you are not a patriotic Kenyan who pays taxes, then you should not be given a chance to serve the country. Kenya Revenue Authority, Mr. Speaker, confirmed to us that a moth is up to date on his tax obligations. Mr. Speaker, there are people who went to school. They were assisted by the government through help. Their fees was paid by the government. But Mr. Speaker, they have never paid back that loan to assist other Kenyans. And we were very keen as a committee, Mr. Speaker, to confirm whether a moth who was assisted by the government, was given loan through help, went to University of Nairobi. We were very keen to confirm whether he had cleared his loan. And I want to assure the House, Mr. Speaker, that his record is clear. He produced a certificate from help, and he confirmed that his loan is not in arrears. He does not have any cases pending with DCI, and is a very impartial Kenyan, Mr. Speaker. He doesn't belong to any political party. He's a dedicated Kenyan who wants to serve, whether you belong to Azimio, whether you belong to UDA. Him is a technocrat who wants to serve Kenyans without any discrimination. So I'm assuring honorable members that this nominee is not a member of any political party. In terms of his financial probity and integrity, Mr. Speaker, you can confirm a nominee, Mr. Speaker, who brings you baggage, who has a lot of debts, who is going to join the public service to look for money to clear his many debts out there, Mr. Speaker. It's important, Mr. Speaker, as a House, when we are approving a nominee, you also look at his finances, Mr. Speaker. Are you bringing somebody on board, Mr. Speaker, who is coming with baggage? But I'm happy to report to the House, Mr. Speaker, that on the case of a moth, he produced a certificate from Credit Reference Bureau, confirmed that his debts are well managed, Mr. Speaker. He has a loan, Mr. Speaker, but that is taken care of. Like any Kenyan, you need to borrow to advance yourself, but he doesn't have any loan defaults. So he's a guy we can hold in high esteem, and I have no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that this Kenyan will serve us well, and I have no hesitation in seconding his nomination to go and serve us in the as a Director General for Health. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I hope as the National Assembly concludes its vetting, Mr. Speaker, they will abide by the provisions of Article 130 of the Constitution so that we have ethnic and regional diversity. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are very litigious. In the history of this country, for the first time, Mr. Speaker, we have seen situations where the courts have nullified 2 finance acts, Mr. Speaker. So we need to be careful as we undertake our vetting or confirmation of our CSS, Mr. Speaker. We need to ensure that we take care of regional and ethnic diversity, Mr. Speaker. And I hope His Excellency the President will very soon address the issue of imbalances on permanent principal secretaries. So, Speaker, people like Pokomos, where Mkatana comes from, they don't have a permanent secretary, they don't have a cabinet secretary. Nyamira, Mr. Speaker, where I come from, we don't have a principal secretary, we don't have a cabinet secretary. You go to Kuria, they have 2 constituencies, Mr. Speaker. There is no principal secretary, no cabinet secretary. The same with the Taitas, Mr. Speaker. We need to build a Kenya where all of us have a sense of belonging, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't mean, Mr. Speaker, that if you come from a small county like Nyamira, where you have 4 constituencies, that you cannot rise to be a cabinet secretary or a principal secretary, Mr. Speaker. One of the most successful cabinet secretaries, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, hailed from Nyamira, Mr. Speaker. So we need, Mr. Speaker, to see the face of Kenya in our executive, Mr. Speaker. So this idea of a broad-based government, Mr. Speaker, should extend to principal secretaries, Mr. Speaker. Those who have been lucky to get cabinet secretaries should not again benefit from the position of principal secretaries, Mr. Speaker. If Kisii County, for example, has gotten the position of cabinet secretary, let Nyamira benefit with a position of principal secretary. This cake belongs to all of us. We can share it, and all of us can feel happy and appreciate the beauty of being a Kenyan, Mr. Speaker. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I second this report. Thank you.
Now, honorable members, I rise to propose the question that the Senate adopts the joint report of the Standing Committee on Health of the Senate and the Departmental Committee of Health of the National Assembly on the approval of a nominee for appointment as Director General for Health, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 1st of August 2024, and further that, pursuant to Section 16(2) of Health Act Cap 241 and Section 8, subsection 2 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, approves. Majority Leader and Majority Whip, you may take your seats. And pursuant to Section 8(2) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, approves the nomination of Dr. Patrick Omwanda Amoth, EBS, for appointment as the Director General for Health. Now, honorable members, I will allow members to contribute if they have any comments on the motion that we have just proposed for debate, and I've seen this interest from among the members. I'll allow Senator Mungatana Danson Buya to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to, on the onset, congratulate the Committee for Health in Senate for the good work they have done. Mr. Speaker, I have a special respect for members of the legal profession and the health profession, medical doctors, and other professions who, from the very early stage, make a decision that they will stick with public service, and they grow in public service all the way to high positions. Mr. Speaker, some of us had those kind of opportunities when we were younger, but we made decision to go into private practice. And Mr. Speaker, I look at a lot of successful medical doctors who went to private practice and made a lot of money. But I also juxtapose that against Dr. Patrick Amoth, who started as a medical intern, Mr. Speaker, became a superintendent, became in charge of Kiambu District Hospital. He rose all the way, Mr. Speaker, at the national level to head the Public Health Directorate, where he was in charge of the strategy, public health strategy that was supposed to provide good health services to all the 47 counties in Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about a dedicated public servant whom we should support, and we should have supported much earlier. Mr. Speaker, how can we keep a public servant so dedicated from the days of his youth to this time at an acting position for 4 years, since 2019 up to today? Mr. Speaker, I think we have wronged this dedicated public servant. And I pray that that should not be repeated. Mr. Speaker, when he succeeded John Masasabi, the last substantive director general, he stayed in that position for 4 years. He kept on doing what he should be doing now, substantively. And Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak to this issue of acting position. I think the government needs to up its game, both at the national and at county level. When